The East African tradition of the Maasai tribe is to greet one another with the words Kasirian Ingera, which is Swahili for, so how are the children? In that community, the well-being of their children is the highest priority. If you are interested in participating in thought-provoking conversations about the well-being of children and families, please tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on 860 AM WNOV. Together, we can save our children.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today with your host, Jermaine Reed and Sean Roby. Good afternoon, Mr. Roby.
Good afternoon, kind sir.
Yeah, Keon Jackson Malone. I got to call him by his full legal name today.
Government.
His government name. He's best engineer in the city. And then we also have Tony Cash in the studio today. It's a lovely day outside. This May, what's today's date? The 18th of May, and it's around 3:06 in the afternoon. Glad to be here again. As you all know, May is National Asthma Awareness Month, National Stroke Month, National Mental Health Month, and National Foster Care. A whole lot of stuff going on. And it seems like that a lot of that stuff could be interconnected.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know. But, yeah, so it's a lovely day, May 18th. Let's see what happened on this day back in 1896. You all know this. The Supreme Court decision on Plessy versus Ferguson upheld the separate but equal policy in the United States. The separate but equal policy in the United States. In 1955, educator and civil rights leader Mary McLeod Bethune died. Rest in peace. That was a woman of educator, pioneer, champion for education.
Absolutely.
1971, former President Nixon rejected the 60 demands of the Congressional Black Caucus. The caucus, utterly disappointed, could only conclude that the Nixon administration lacked a sense of understanding, urgency, and commitment in dealing with the critical problems facing Black Americans. I think that's almost every presidential administration up to this point. I'm going to reserve my comment about the current administration right now. I had seen a clip some time ago. I think it was Tavis Smiley had a roundtable discussion with the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and Jesse Jackson and a number of folks. Michael Eric Dyson. Is it Eric Dyson or Erickson Dyson? Michael Eric Dyson was on there, and Dyson, he pretty much shut it down. Look up on YouTube, just say State of the Black Union, Michael Eric Dyson, and I probably have to concur with some of those statements that he made several years ago. But BCDI 9th Annual Shining Stars Celebration. Now, that's going to be going on tomorrow, May 19th. You don't want to miss that event. You can go to Shining Stars at BCD, as in Daniel, I as in Indiana, Milwaukee spelled out .org, or you can call 855-653-2234. 855-653-2234, and that's the BCDI 9th Annual Shining Star Celebration. And they're going to have a special guest. I know her first name is Evelyn. I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but she was one of the original founders.
Evelyn K. Moore.
Evelyn, oh, you know Evelyn because you sit on the board of directors. So
yes, sir.
Speak up. Let the people hear you.
I wanted to let you finish first.
I'm going to let you finish.
Well, thank you.
Go ahead.
The Shining Star Celebration will be tomorrow. Again, the BCDI Milwaukee branch will be honoring Milwaukee leaders, improving and advancing the quality of life for Black children and their families. The four leading Shining Stars are going to be Rodney Barrage, Andre Lee Ellis, Peggy J. Hardy, and Dr. Darian Driver, and there will be several stellar child care providers being acknowledged as well.
Sounds great. So we had a great time on yesterday. For 5-6 months, we have been advertising, talking about the Color Child Welfare Conference, and yesterday we convened with about 300 and some champions at the Crown Plaza Hotel out by the airport. We had a number of dynamic speakers and presenters, including Jane Elliott, which we introduced on the show last week, Dr. Stacy Patton. We had Dana World Patterson. We also had, let me see who else was on there, Ophelia King and Wanda Montgomery. We had a lot of attorney Stephen Esty from California did a very powerful workshop on Lifting the Veil, Prevalence of Child Sexual Abuse and Liability in Foster Care. We also had Dr. Jamie Schwann, who's an author and military personnel, and he was formerly in foster care. We just had a number of folks. Martha Love, the great Martha Love, she brought all her energy into the place. Laura Johnson did a marvelous job on the topic of human sex trafficking, but particularly around the Jezebel myth in terms of how black women have been commercialized, their body for over years, even through government policy. So it was just a phenomenal convening, and hopefully the next time we have it that you all will be able to respond. It kind of amazed me that at the last minute we had just a volume of folks wanting to get into the conference, even after having advertised for 5 months. People got to understand when you order food from a catering department, you cannot call the day of and want to get in. And eat. Now you can get in, but you might not get anything to eat. And so you can't be upset and mad if you didn't prepare and plan properly. So that's really important when we're trying to put on events. But I want to just thank everybody that was there, and hopefully the information that they received will encourage and inspire those individuals to go back into their individual settings and affect change. We have a lot of work to do around racial disproportionality. Some folks may not be aware that according to a national study that was done in 2011, Wisconsin ranked number 3 in terms of the number of African Americans who are disproportionately represented in the foster care system. That's number 3. Prior to that, I believe the data was 2007. We were in the number 1 spot. So right now we're in the top 3. But again, it's going to take all of us working together to reduce that 68.2% of African American children who are in our local foster care system. So we're going to recap the conference a little bit on today's show. I'm going to play you a clip because I think one of the most controversial presentation was the one that was done by Dr. Stacy Patton, and she was talking about the historical roots of corporal punishment in the black families, and she was linking that back to the legacy of slavery, particularly basically saying that black folks, when we when we physically discipline our children, that is synonymous with beating and abusing our children, and what we're doing is perpetuating the legacy of slavery. So that kind of hit a nerve with probably at least 150 of the folks in the room, because at least it was 150 black folks in the room, and other was people of other color groups.
Absolutely.
And it was interesting. It was interesting because the foster care community is comprised of a number of folks who are from the religious or faith-based community. And, there is a quote that is not necessarily in the Bible verbatim that people often refer to, which is spare the rod, you spoil the child, and people swear that's in the Bible. But there is a version of that's in the Bible, but that particular quote verbatim is not in the Bible. But there are some other couple places that it is located, or that issue is directed to in the Bible. And we're going to kind of talk about this belief, this value system of physical discipline. Does it work? Do it not work? How effective are timeouts? At some point, do you have to lay hands versus timeout? And particularly if you are a foster parent and you're in the state of Wisconsin and in most states where foster parents are not allowed, probably in all states, are not allowed to physically discipline a child. So if you would like to join this conversation, you can call 414-444-5250. We're going to take a break, or we're going to play the clip. Hey, why don't we play the clip, and then we'll get into this discussion.
I come to you not as a social worker, not as a clinician or medical professional. I come to you not as someone who sets policies and best practices in child welfare. I come not to you as a parent or a school teacher, but I come to you and I come to this topic as a historian who has looked at the origins of physical discipline in African American families and at the historical genesis of a popular practice that ends up contributing to some of the social problems it is believed to prevent. I come to you as case number KC114343 in the New Jersey foster care system, as a survivor whose adoptive mother whipped her with belts, extension cords, switches, brooms, her hands, and other objects, all in the name of discipline, all in the name of teaching me a lesson. My adoptive mother literally was a mix between Joan Crawford's Mommy Dearest, no wire hangers, and Sybil Dorset's mother. So imagine those two characters together, except she was black. She believed that beating me was part of loving and being a caring and responsible black parent. She thought her actions would protect me from the harsh realities of being young and black in America. She believed that by beating me, she would save me from falling prey to the streets, from prison, from an early grave. She'd tell me over and over again that if she didn't beat me, the white man would. She told me I was a little black girl growing up in America, and if I stepped out of line, the white man would put me in the place. The white man didn't want to see me grow up. The white man didn't want me to have anything. And so as a young girl, I kept thinking, who is this white man? Is it Bob Barker from The Price is Right? Was it Mr. Rogers? Was it Ronald Reagan? Maybe. After all, he wanted us to eat ketchup. My adoptive mother in the black community in which I grew up had a very perverse embrace of physical discipline of children. But what they did not realize was that the problems that black children face was not because we weren't being spanked, popped, whipped, or beaten enough. We lived in a society that has fundamentally hated us and engaged in all kinds of overt and covert strategies and practices that were designed to keep us from growing up, that were designed to devalue us and undermine our potential and our possibilities. And that hate, that devaluation, bled into the ways in which some of our parents raised us. Those violent child-rearing tactics have fed far too many of us into emergency rooms, into the child welfare industry, and into the school-to-prison pipeline. We often hear experts and parents debate about physical discipline on the radio, on talk shows, in other public spaces, but what's really missing from the conversation is the voice of the child, the one who can articulate and most articulately convey the pain and the trauma and the impact of being physically disciplined in the name of protection and love.
Well, there we have the keynote luncheon speaker, Dr. Stacey Patton. She's also an author and educator, professor over at Morgan State University. So she's talking about corporal punishment. I mean, is it appropriate to physically discipline your child? Is physically disciplining our children working? And if it is working, how does it work? And if it's not working, what should we be doing differently when it comes to correcting certain behaviors? We're talking about behavior modification strategies. One thing I know that Dr. Patton had kind of talked about, that if whooping our children is actually being effective, then why is it that people of color is whooping our children preventing our children from being, and our young men from being incarcerated? Is whooping our children preventing preventing law enforcement from treating our children, our youth, and our men and women in our community respectfully? If whooping our children is going to keep folks in line, keep us in line, so that we don't have to deal with certain type of behaviors and repercussions from folks in other systems and communities, how effective is whipping? And I don't know. Some folks that was in the room, like I said, they were religious folks, and everybody kind of referred to, well, Dr. Stacey Patton said that spoiling the child, you spare the rod, you spoil the child, and that's not in the Bible. And she's actually correct. It's not in the Bible. Now there's some versions of it, and when I was thinking about, when I was doing the research, actually Proverbs 13:24 reads, "He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him." Oftentimes. He who withholds his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him diligently. So you have to go back to what the basic definition is of discipline. Discipline is a teaching mechanism. It has to have a teaching component to it. And physical discipline is not the only means by which you can discipline your son. And then you also have to look at that scripture or that literature and says, okay, well, what does rod mean? Because automatically, when you say rod, the first thing we think of is a curtain rod, a metal object, or, but I don't know that, in the literal sense, it was talking about, a rod. But then there was a scripture that I came across that was talking about if you beat your son or you beat your child, you will deliver their soul from hell, so, and I don't know if they were talking about the literal hell that we reference with fire and brimstone, but I think it means a life of destruction. So does physically disciplining your child or beating your child, are they different? Physically disciplining your child, different from beating your child? Is it working? Do folks think that, well, you know what, if we physically discipline our kids more and not be concerned about what law enforcement or child welfare thinks about it, that it will eventually keep black children from going into the system, it'll keep black children from being suspended at the rate they're being suspended in comparison to children from other communities? Does whipping our children really work? You can call 414-444-5250. We're going to take a brief break and come back after this commercial and move further into this conversation.
This is Jermaine reporting from Fresh Start's WBCM, Wisconsin Black Children Matter. Did you know that the number of black children in Milwaukee's foster care community continues to rise? According to the Department of Children and Families' most recent annual report, black children made up 68.2% of Milwaukee's foster kids. Many of these children are not only removed from their family and siblings, but are placed in families and communities that do not reflect or honor their race, culture, or heritage. Fresh Start is an agency that is committed to serving and advocating for black children. In order to meet the needs of this growing population, we need more black families in the Milwaukee area that love and celebrate black children. To become a licensed, culturally responsive foster parent with Fresh Start, you must be 21 years old, married or single with a stable income, clear several criminal background checks, and complete 36 hours of pre-licensing training. To learn more about other qualifications, call 414-351-1100. That's 414-351-1100. Again, this is Jermaine reporting from Fresh Start, WBCM, Wisconsin Black Children Matter.
White people stopped all that. Y'all stopped all that. Yeah, y'all stopped all that. Now it's a law. If you hit your child, you go to jail. Y'all wasn't even the ones that getting beat. But you want to have a little moral heart. Y'all don't know nothing about the extension cord, do you, little white girl? Y'all don't know nothing about this. Y'all don't know nothing about the Hot Wheel track. They don't know nothing about the Christmas tree lights. They hit their child one time. Go to your room. Black people hit their child 92 times. In the eye, in the nuts, in the feet. That's where the real pop locking came from. Remember your mom and dad? Oh my God, my mom and dad, remember they would hit you so hard they would knock the sound out of you? Bow! And then you went into the hiccup cry. Shut up. You couldn't explain nothing doing the hiccup cry. Me. Then they give you about an hour to calm down. Then your cries will go in 2-second intervals. Then they come in the room. You ready to tell me what happened? Yeah. What happened? Oh, okay. See, me, and you know if you take it too long, right, you know what's coming. Okay, me, wait, I'ma tell you. Let go of the belt. No, you're trying to kill me. White people, welcome to our world. Ain't nothing wrong with beating your kids. Most of us got beat. We turned out all right.
So James Brown singing about "Mama, come here, quick, bring me." Who asked their mama to bring a stick to beat them with? A licking stick. I had never heard that song before. How do you dance and get and groove to getting a whooping? I don't understand that.
Maybe that's how he got his footwork.
I don't know. I guess we did do some fancy footwork when we were getting our whoopings then. But Joyce, we're going to take your call in just 1 second, Joyce. You please hold on. So, and then we had Arnez J. So he had talked about, a lot of folk probably listen to this program can relate to some of those pieces of his joke. We know that physical discipline is used in every community.
Absolutely.
In every community, not just in most countries. People have used a form of physical discipline to correct behavior and to instill lessons to children. But Dr. Stacey Patterson's position was that two things. One is that physical discipline is equivalent to abuse, that all forms of physical contact discipline is abuse, equates to abuse because of the pain that's inflicted on the child and the psychological, emotional, and physical trauma that is caused as a result of being hit. And so we want to know, in this conversation today, at what point, is it good to whoop kids? Is it working? Joyce, thank you for calling Fresh Start today. What are your thoughts?
My thought is never to whip a child. I think it is inhumane, and maybe some children, when they're at an early, you may have to give them a little spank. But I think when a child is past 6 years old, you can sit that child down and listen to him, and talk to him, and rationalize with him. I was a child that was whipped, and I don't see any good it did, but made me better to understand that I should not whip mine. It did that for me, but anything else, no. If I had not caught those whippings, I would probably did the same thing raising my children, and I most definitely would not have went to jail because that just was not my nature. I think it is inhumane, and I get very upset because mostly I hear it is from the Christian family that say that whipping is good. Beating, they don't even say whip, they say whoop, and it just irritates me. And I feel sorry for foster children. Not all foster parents are mean, but most of them think they have some kind of evil something to whip out of these children. They just don't understand that the child itself has been abused, and I think if you give it more loving care, the child would be a better child than whipping it and trying to hide it from the authorities. So that's my comment.
So in terms of your childhood, you said that you were whipped when you were a child, and
right.
You didn't see any good in. What do you think that your parents learned that discipline strategy from?
I think from my grandfather.
So
because that's what he did. He whipped them. That's what they said, and I think maybe it come from slavery because my mother always talked about her father whipped them. So thank God I broke the cycle with my family because I just don't think it accomplished anything.
Well, and that's interesting because that is one of Dr. Patterson's main point is that this is perpetuating the legacy of slavery when we physically discipline our children. In fact, she was talking about that during slavery, black parents were forced to traumatize black infants' bodies by not just physical discipline, but also by not meeting their primal needs, and that these infants were birthed into families and to parents who, although they deeply cherished the children, but due to that love, they would have wanted them to be able to survive under their social conditions. So during infancy, these parents would harden them, hoping that these rites would prepare them to survive in the environment of slavery. But then you'll have folks who say, well, we're not in slavery anymore, so what is the value in the use, chattel slavery? We're not under that system of slavery. Maybe other forms of bondage and, other types of, what am I trying to say? Bondage or suppression, oppression.
Yeah, when you talk about invisible slavery,
Okay.
things that are not.
May I ask you one question?
Sure.
Okay, I know you're a professional. So what's your opinion? Do you really think it accomplished anything? I would like your opinion.
Okay, but I don't want to give you my position as a professional. I'll give you my position as a human being, because sometimes as a professional, your value may be a little bit different than what you're required to do. Now, personally, I don't think that, popping a kid on the hand is abusive. I don't think that. I think, if you knock the kid upside the head, you punch the kid in the mouth, you hit the kid in the eye, you knock the kid down the stairs, even verbally, if you're verbally abusive, call the kids out of there, I think those things are bad. But I can honestly say that when I was a younger father, and I'm still pretty young, I think I am, but in my 20s, I received whoopings when I was a kid. Most of my friends have received whoopings when they were a kid, and I'm not saying that I turned out all right, but I wouldn't say that was related to being whooped or not being whooped. But I think there's other factors and other resources and tools that my mother and my extended family used to help shape me to become who I am today. That's on a personal level, not professionally. So my personal thing is, I popped my daughter on the behind when she was young when I wanted her to correct a certain behavior. Some people may not agree with that, but that's what I did. Now the question would become, would I do that again with my child? I'm not for whooping other folks' kids. I'm not even for per se whipping. But my daughter really haven't given me a lot of problems or issues where I had to physically discipline her. But when she was a child, did she get popped on her hand? Stop, don't do that, don't touch. Yes, I did. Would I do it again? Yes, I would. And that's just me.
That's a different form of discipline. If you see a child near outlet and you spank him on the hand, well, that's fine, because that's something that's going to endanger him at the moment. And but from that, you learn how to prevent that outlet from being open. So I think it's a way to do it. Of course, I never had to do it, so I call it being blessed.
Right.
But I can see if a child is really being naughty in the store, and I'm not talking about these parents that cuss at if a child is tired and he's want to get home to get his rest or whatever, and the mom is trying to pay for a grocery, and she will give him a tap and tell him be quiet, and that's a different form of discipline. I can understand that, but when someone tells you, go get a switch and let me whip you, Lord have mercy.
And take your clothes off, and and I think there's a difference between discipline in and of itself is not bad. It's when we start talking about physical discipline that is abusive. Now that's where I'm coming from. No, I have never whipped my child. I would never whip my child. I would never pull out a belt and a what you call it?
Switch.
A switch and a stitching cord and a hanger. To me, that's just abusive. Is insanity.
Okay, I agree. Thanks.
All right. Thanks a lot, Joyce. Thank you for calling. Sharice, you're listening to Fresh Start today. We're talking about physical discipline. Is it good to discipline your child, physically discipline your child? I mean, does it work? And if it doesn't work, what should we be doing instead of that? Time in, time out, what?
Well, my thing is, I guess you have to look and decide what kind of child you are. When I grew up, I got some whoopings, but basically my parents really tried their best to be the role model. If they said don't cuss, they didn't cuss. If they said don't steal, they didn't steal. So really, it was just kind of seeing what my parents do and knew what was unacceptable. And if I did do something they felt they did need to discipline me, it was something serious. Like, I think the last time I would have gotten a whooping is because I took matches, played with fire, and set a rug on fire. And my dad felt, this could have put us in immediate danger.
Right.
You need to know that this is totally unacceptable. You could have lost your life and endangered everybody else. So I remember getting that spanking. But for my own children, it's like teaching, being a role model so they know what's right and wrong. And for me to get to the point where I have to physically use a bill, it would be imminent danger. If my kids feel like they're going to always run out and dart out in front of a street in a car and they could get hit by a car, that I might want to be like, okay, I really need them to know they cannot do this. And since they did not understand me verbally, they didn't understand I read a book to them, they didn't understand that the school said it, well, then I would go there. But I think a lot of times people want to use the first mode of discipline is that I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm just going to whoop you. And it's like your kid tends to build up a fear for you, but when they go out into the world, They don't fear the teachers because the teachers can't whoop them. They don't fear anybody in authority because that person can't put hands on them. And they start respecting and fearing people who can actually beat them. And it's like, well, that's not where we want this to go. I want my kids to not steal and to do the things they're supposed to do outside of in the world when they're away from me because they know right from wrong. They know ethics and morals and values. I don't want them to say, well, I don't snap on a teacher because I don't want to get beat. You missed the whole point. You missed it if you think the purpose of not snapping on a teacher or not being disrespectful or not being disoriented in the classroom is because I'm going to beat you. That's not what the moral of the story is supposed to be. You're supposed to be going to school to learn because it's important. You need your education. This is how you're going to use the means to grow up and become a productive citizen, not because your mom's going to beat you. And that's the part where I'm kind of lost, and I have friends. We go back and forth. And I look at some of their kids, and I look at my kids. I'm like, parents, teachers, they come and say, well, your kid is very respectful, very nice, very compassionate. That's what I want. And my kids and I, we both learn in the household, okay, we need to work on that. That was disrespectful. I don't want you to do that. So that's my thing. I think it's the whoopings and stuff, but if you're beating out of anger and frustration and you lost the teaching, I think that's where we're getting away from. Thanks.
Gotcha.
Have a nice day.
All right. Thank you, Sharice, for calling.
And you know what? I appreciate that because one of the key things that she said is the modeling behavior. And another thing she said several times was teaching moments, teaching moments, teaching moments, teaching moments. And when you're teaching, that means you're not only doing it verbally, but non-verbally. And when you're modeling, you're educating and talking to your child about, hey, this stove is hot. I don't want you running by this stove because you can hurt yourself really bad. And she mentioned if the child is running out or darting out in the street, if you got that child and you notice they're a child full of energy and they dart out there, but you grab them and pull them in, that has brought shock to that child. But at that same moment, you don't run out in that street because something terrible can happen to you. So it's a matter of communicating throughout all of your discipline techniques.
No.
She didn't use, and another thing she said, whooping is not the first and only method of discipline. And one thing I think sometimes culturally we get confused is beatings and whoopings.
What's the difference between a beating and a whooping?
Every day of the week, all the time.
What's the difference between beating and a whooping?
I think personally, and we've heard it a few times, and I've heard it from different cultures, is that a popping on the hand. Something like that does not leave marks.
So spanking, is that equivalent to a whipping, spanking? Is that what we're saying? And that abuse is something different? Because
I believe so.
Okay, because I don't think those
when
are
you talk
synonymous.
about whoopings and spankings, I think depending on the culture, they use those terms.
Okay.
But when you talk about abuse, you're talking about excessive force where somebody is, and I think you mentioned punching kids in the chest. Like a 5-year-old shouldn't be getting punched in the chest and being called out their names.
A 15-year-old shouldn't be punched in the chest and called out their name.
I agree. And that 15-year-old might hit a parent back.
A 15-year-old shouldn't be punched in the chest and called out their name. I don't think size has anything to do with it. I think that I think that's what it gets to be abusive when you start physically. Yes, sir. When you start physically, because you're in your mind evaluating how much force that you think you need to use to correct a certain behavior. And I just think there are other things. If you have to start punching your son in the chest at 15, then the thing that I will question is what was going on between you and your son when he was 5 years old. You know,
and that goes back to that modeling aspect, I personally think, because all children at some point, they start to
test boundaries.
Test boundaries, what we call smell themselves and whatnot. And so the older I get.
But how does punching in the chest?
Well,
punching. We said punching in the chest. How does that help?
Well, me as a child, and I'm a professional whooping getter.
Okay.
So in all my history, I don't regret nothing. It made me who I am, and I was a tough child. You know, I come from stock where my grandmother was a talker, my mother was a talker, and my father was a talker. So at some point, somebody gonna stop talking. Now, me myself at 12 had a football injury because I was good. I was a big Rocky Socky Docky football player. So around that same time, I got one of them last whoopings where my father injured himself trying to do the hand on the body thing, and I was a different type of rock. Yeah. So if you didn't get the message then, but once again, like Cherie said, it's about the learning. My parents weren't abusive. You know what I'm saying? My parents were teachers of the culture, and you're going to understand what I'm telling you. Now, in my house, in my family, you usually got warnings. you know. And as far as physical discipline was a "I told you so" result. So,
Right.
you know.
But that wasn't the number one.
No, it wasn't. You got
The first
quit.
alternative.
Don't make
The
me.
option. You
There
had
were
other
techniques.
resources.
Yeah,
and
Now-
other
and
options.
then I'm going to say I never got whipped. Well, I have gotten whipped when you get caught talking slick, fresh out the shower, and you don't have no clothes on. Well, that just happened to be a whipping moment, but I got whoopings.
Or when you sleep and you wake up
Oh,
getting a
okay,
whooping.
So what is
Someone to
discipline?
cover,
What is the stakeholder? Because we're talking about foster care, particularly because sometimes whipping and physical discipline can be the doorway to foster care for a lot of children, and particularly for African American communities. If we hold this value of physically disciplining our kids to a point where it's abusive, and again, remember, abusive should be defined or is defined in code, but I also think the person who is doing the assessment, that there can be some biases that, contribute to what that outcome is. So a lot of things may not be abusive because I'm from a different community or I was raised differently. What you did, what you said to your son has caused emotional harm or damage. What you didn't give your son, now you're neglecting that child. So I think it has to do with who that person is that's assessing.
Exactly.
We want to take this call from Dennis. Dennis, you're listening to Fresh Start Today. You have a brief question or comment as it relates to this topic?
Yeah, real quick, man. Thank you for taking my call. And also, congratulations on yesterday, man. You had a beautiful event, man. I really enjoyed the time that I was there. But as well, just the subject that you're talking about is so important because, one of the things that we're teaching the fathers that we work with is about fathering with fear and violence. And a lot of times we want our children to fear us, and we use violence as a way to try to gain their respect. And fear and violence doesn't create respect. It just creates more fear and violence.
Or do it create compliance?
But in most situations it don't. I'm gonna tell you, I got toe up when I was a kid.
Toe up?
But it didn't stop me from doing bad things. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So did it work?
And for us, I think that we just have to understand that the nature of parenting has to evolve. What we did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago is not what you do today. And you know what I'm saying? You just
so what do we do today, Dennis? What do we do today? What do we do today? If we, because parenting evolves, the world is ever evolving. So if receiving physical discipline didn't stop you and me and some other folks from doing certain things that our parents told us not to do, then did it work?
No, it didn't work. I mean, I can't say it didn't work because it was at that time. That's what they did as a matter of discipline. I'm saying that when you look at the effectiveness of it, in some situations it worked, in some situations it didn't. But is it the best thing for us to be doing today? And I think today we need to have a better understanding with our kids to where our relationship is such to where they respect us because we're communicating with them effectively. A lot of times we're yelling and screaming at them, but we're not communicating.
Right.
And communication is a skill within itself. A lot of times we're not giving our children the opportunity so that we can communicate with them because we're trying to command everything.
We try to command everything. So when I was talking about compliance means that I might do what you want me to do in your presence, but then I do something totally different in your absence.
Exactly.
So in most abusive situation, a man who physically abused a woman might say, okay, she respects me. She'll respect me because I'm a man because he physically abused her. But does she respect him? Or does she just comply with what he's asking of her? So do our children respect us? And do you think that perhaps, and this is in Milwaukee, that some of the behavior and things that we're seeing in our children in terms of deviant, defiant behavior in the school setting, in the community setting, and even in the home setting is because we have not been physically disciplining our children like maybe perhaps we were physically disciplined as a kid. We had kids who call their mamas bees, and in our culture we didn't hear that.
It's not no shortage of kids that's getting beaten, getting their behind whooped in this city, man. So that's a myth within.
That's itself. A myth. So we still getting whooped. Our kids still getting whooped.
Still getting whooped, and I just don't think that it's the most effective strategy when it comes to raising a family. Again, a healthy environment, one that's functional and not dysfunctional, is not you beating your kid and using fear and violence to get them to respect you.
So, is certain behaviors and things that we're seeing between the parent-child relationship, the student-teacher relationship, do you think that is environmental factors that's influenced if our kids are still getting whippings, beatings, or are physically disciplined? I mean, what's happening here? Because I just talked with an administrator in a school setting this morning, and this person said two things to me I think is really important. That's really important. And one of them is, this person said, well, every so often my child got to get a whooping. Every so often they got to get a they work up on one and they gave me a time frame. They say every 6 months, this person is due, and I said, okay. Then the other piece said, well, you know what? That person did tell me there had to be other tools and resources in the kid, and it also depends on who the child is, but I'm just concerned. Does it work, and are we causing more trauma to children through physical? Because if we're still talking about whippings and beatings being the same, are we causing more trauma to our kids?
Well,
and are they become immune to it?
A couple of things. First of all, I told you I was a pro. What it did for me is it showed me boundaries, to an extent. And then you did say something about being out of the presence. See, my father had this thing, boy, you better act better when I'm out of your presence.
Not around.
And what year of parenting, what time frame we're talking about there?
Well, see, that was when I was younger. See, some things started young, don't have to see we have now is a lot of not teaching moments and not disciplining. You can't say nothing to nobody's child. They get to do what they want.
Some parents can't look at their kids the wrong way.
Then they become older and you can't get control of them.
But wait a minute. We also have this thing where kids will say, well, I'm going to go to school, tell my teacher, because we have different parents today than I think our grandparents and our parents.
Because I said that too. And I was told, and I'll beat you when I get out. So it's
right. But reality is, I think a lot of parents are afraid to physically discipline their kids the way that our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents, in terms of how they use behavior modification strategies, because of I think that's also why it's a piece of why we have the number of kids who are coming into care, black kids coming into care. I don't think that everything is abusive, but I don't think that physical abuse should be the first alternative. There should be some other methods. We have Mike on Fresh Start today. Mike, do you have a question or comment as relates to this topic?
Yes. I have 4 children between the ages of 35 and 42. And I discipline them.
How do you mean discipline? How? What kind of discipline?
Well, in corporal punishment, you never do that in anger. So I kept me a board of education around, and I told them, you know what you're not supposed to do, and that starts when they're little bitty. When they first start to crawl around, you got to teach them boundaries at that time, and you have to keep reinforcing and teaching that.
There you go.
I don't have to whip my little kids because they never deserve whipping, but as they grow older.
But, okay, talk to me.
Things that they must learn are harmful to themselves and others, and those are the times when you may have to use corporal punishment. But they can count on all of them, on one of them's 2 hands, the number of whippings they've had their whole life. And, again, I never did it like flailing away. I kept the Board of Education around, and I asked them. They were in on it. You want 3 licks with this board, or do I have to get my belt out?
So you gave them the power of choice.
I gave them the power of choice, and
But what kind of choice is that? What kind of pain do you want?
I don't want pain.
Well, the police are still abusing our kids. They're still treating them bad. They're still locking up our boys. They're still shooting our sons in their heads, in their back, who are armed. So
years old has never been in a jail.
Right.
Okay. I may have whipped him 2 or 3 times in his 36 years. But there are times when they do things that are detrimental to themselves and others.
Yes, sir. I hear you.
Punishment becomes necessary.
I hear you.
So did that physical punishment also involve you explaining or communicating with them as to what they did?
I did more communicating with them than anything.
There you go. And so that's a huge piece of it, is the communication. Because I know some of our parents, when they got finished whooping us or beating us, then they explained to us why I whooped you. So, but you say on the front end, you talk to them, you give them chances, and then when they violate or break the law, then you have to execute judgment.
Yes, and I did it before the spanking part came.
I got you. Yes, sir. Well, this is your first time listening to Fresh Start today?
Wrong enough for that.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. You have a great afternoon.
You know what, Jay?
Now, we got a few more minutes left of this program, so if anybody else wants to comment, I know Mr. Roby is going to give me some state statutes around foster care as it relates to corporal and physical punishment, because I think that's a little different. That community of parenting is different from birth parenting. Keon, what you going to say?
And that's exactly what I was going to say. There was something you said about whooping other people's kids. Now, one thing about that punishment with my father, this is the same man who I've saw pull somebody else off their child like that's too much. You know, like the man said, it was a teaching thing for me. Whereas a foster parent is not a biological parent. There's like a connection with a child and his parents to where I believe my parents felt my life was in some type of danger. The things I were doing were detrimental to my health and my survival. So therefore I got corporal punishment. And I wanted to make sure I said that. I just didn't walk around getting beat, but I was a tough kid. And he felt, you belong to me. I have to correct this because you are part of me. I know you better than you know yourself.
Okay.
When we talk about discipline from DCF, which is the Department of Children and Family State Code, discipline. Disciplinary action by a foster parent or any other person serving as a substitute caretaker in the absence of the foster parent shall be aimed at encouraging the foster child to understand what is appropriate social behavior. The types of discipline imposed shall be appropriate to the child's age and understanding. Physical punishment of foster children is prohibited. A licensee may not subject any foster child to verbal abuse, profanity, derogatory remarks about the child or his or her family, or to threats to expel the child from the home. A licensee may not permit another child or adult or child other than a responsible care provider to discipline a foster child. No foster child may be punished by being deprived of meals, male, or family interaction.
So Wisconsin has a law in place that governs foster care in Chapter 56 that says there's a no hands-on policy unless you're trying to prevent that child from causing injury to themselves or to others. But it shouldn't be choking and slapping and pulling. So say this kid was about to run out in the street, you had to snatch him to keep him because they could be impulsive or whatever. That was not abusive. Your intent was not to cause harm. But just as a standard measure, say, okay, well, you messed up in school today, I'm going to get you when you get home. Your behind is mine. You can't do that. It's no hands-on policy. And I do believe, now this is me talking and tell you, let me tell you, I've had a lot of experience with a lot of foster kids over the year professionally and personally, and what I have seen, there are some foster children, because they are used to getting physically disciplined, will challenge and try you to get you to physically disciplined. Right. I almost think that some kids want to get a whooping. And so they want to be physically disciplined, and they know that, okay, well, my parent can't do it, or the foster parent can't do it, the teacher can't do it, and so I'm going to tear this house up, tear this school up. It's not saying it's the healthiest thing, but it's what I'm accustomed to, it's what I'm used to, and guess what? I didn't behave this way at home. So if mom and dad use some form of physical discipline, but it wasn't necessarily abusive, physical abuse. It was physical discipline, but somebody assessed and said it was abuse, but it really wasn't abuse. The kids know they wasn't abuse. The kids didn't fear the parents, and the kids weren't acting no fool. You know, but now you put them in a different system where we change the laws and say, you know what, it is okay because you've had trauma in your life, and so the kid knows, everybody knows, and the kids will tell you, you can't touch me. You can't put your hand on me.
Yeah.
And they have used this thing called making false allegations against providers around physical abuse because that's the power that they have. Now, that's some foster kids. That's some foster kids, not all foster kids. But we just wanted to make that point clear. And the other thing, too, there was a report by Elizabeth Gershoff, Report on Physical Punishment in the United States, what research tells us about its effect on children. She did this report back in 2008. And what she saw was that in terms of physical, individuals who spank their children are more likely to whip, paddle, and use other physical punishments for discipline. And what she saw as it relates to different communities, supposedly that African Americans in 89% of the cases physically discipline their kids, whereas only 80% Hispanics and 79% whites and 73% Asian. I don't know that any of those numbers are good, and I don't know if physical discipline always work. Did it work for me sometimes? Yes, sometimes I did what my parents wanted me to do. Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I got a whooping. Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I don't know. I just don't know around this topic because it really is a very sensitive topic, and a lot of us hold a lot of religious value around physically disciplining our kids, and we use it as a measure to keep our kids in line so that the white man and so that the law enforcement, that them folks won't get to our kids. But the reality is the systems are already getting to our kids. So if whipping and physically disciplining them, going to keep them out of special education, is going to keep them out of remedial classes, going to keep them out of foster care, going to keep them out of being incarceration, then I probably can say that physical discipline and whipping your children work. But since those things are not keeping them from those environments and them systems, then I think we have to come up with another form. It's been great talking to you on Fresh Start today. We'll be back next week. Be well, be safe. Talk to you soon.